Have you ever wondered whether the problems in the world today would exist if we had deeper connection to ourselves, others, and the environment, and acted from that place?
Welcome to the Conscious Action Podcast with your hosts Brian Berneman and Kayla Greenville, who believe that connection is the key to taking conscious action as individuals and creating a better world.
We are here to raise awareness and inspire meaningful action by sharing stories, knowledge, and conversations with thought leaders and changemakers.
From sustainability to well-being and everything related to conscious living, our mission is to empower you to be the change that you want to see in the world. Welcome everyone to a new episode of the Conscious Action Podcast. I am Brian Berneman, your host, and I have the pleasure to be joined all the way from Northern California by Indra Rinzler. Thank you, Indra, for taking the time to be here with us, for sharing this space with us. And for everyone that is listening, can you share a little bit about who Indra is and your path?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Who Indra is the path. So I've been on the spiritual path for more than 50 years. I got into it unexpectedly in my early 20s as I started going to metaphysical bookstores, which I had never known about before when I first moved to California, 1970. And it took a while. I suppose the path has been straightforward, but that doesn't mean there weren't hills and valleys in it. And what it meant to be on the path has, of course, changed. But I lived in an ashram for 20 years. I raised my family in an ashram. And then the ashram days were over. I graduated. And then I started traveling the world. And for the last 10 years or so, I've been doing professionally astrology. I shouldn't say I created. It was created, this life reading that I offer clients, 3 different modalities, astrology being one of them, to help people to wake up to who they really are, not who they think they are. And it's a culmination of my own 50 plus years of search, my interest in mathematics and interest in spirituality to find ways to place us in this life. Interestingly enough, we were just talking about longitude and latitude. We both lived at different latitudes, different places with the same latitude. And so I call Enneagram, one of the modalities I use, the Enneagram of Personality in astrology. I think of them as longitude and latitude, that with one of them, you can place yourself with a longitude number. Mm-hmm. But with the 2 of them, you really can cross yourself into a specific location. And so that's what the modalities that I use and the reading is helpful to do, is to help people to understand what is this dream that I'm living. What are my realities? Why doesn't it work? And what am I trying to do? And what am I seeking? And so the modalities show that, and that's what I share.
Beautiful. Thank you. And I'm interested, Indra, if you could share a little bit more on, you said you lived for 20 years in the ashram and then you graduated. Can you share a little bit more for those that are listening? What does life in the ashram look like?
Well, it was, there used to be a theme. One of the themes that the talks would be is spiritualizing daily life, as in the retreat facility that we had, spiritualizing daily life. And so living in an ashram is spiritualizing each moment, is that you're living for God, you're living for your teachers, you're living not for the mainstream. I was writing this morning, I left the mainstream about 1971, and I haven't really returned ever. And so the ashram life was living for the ideals of a community, living the ideals of the teacher, and putting my own agenda aside. And the graduation was that it came a time that for most people, for many people, is that they leave the nest of what was comfortable, because the work needs to be done in different ways, in different places, different things to learn. That the person the persons who never left, and there are people, they've been living there more than 50 years now. They're very deep into that particular path and modality, and they're not so learned in other ways, and that's okay. It's the path is different for everybody. And so it came a time when I needed to get back out on my own, I suppose. My whole life was turned over. The kids are grown. The marriage was done as it was, and I was leaving the community. And there were a couple of difficult days, but then afterward, there was really the joy of the discovery, with things being new and unknown. And that's and there is a cycle where that is beautiful in itself. It doesn't need anything else other than the newness of each moment, and what you're going to do, and what you're going to experience.
Yes, yes. And it's so interesting. I mean, I only lived 2 years, not 20 years, but like I know completely what you're saying about this, that you are in this beautiful cocoon that is the community, that is like living in that place, and then getting out of there and coming to, like in my case, like after a little bit coming to New Zealand, it's like, okay, like there's all of these different things now that I need to deal with, and okay, that's how am I using as well all of my understandings and all of my learnings throughout those times to use, as you were saying, with spirituality and everyday life. And I would like for us to explore a little bit more of that, because I think that in my experience, there's a lot of people that it's like spirituality is an aspect of their life, and then there's their life. And it's like, well, no, like everything is your life and everything can be spiritual. So for people that are listening, that perhaps they are a little bit in that place of separation, what would you share with them?
Well, I would share that it's one of the logical hills and valleys of a spiritual life is what I was saying at the beginning, that the understanding and the passion I have today is not what I had 50 years ago, and the spirituality was outside the self initially, and then I came to realize that it isn't anywhere separate. And some people will know that right away, and some people it will be the last, yes, now I see, and it doesn't really matter. That lessons come in different levels and different frequencies and different timing, and but the lesson of that we're all one, that there is no separation, that we are not separate, and that this is the lesson of spirituality, and the deepening of that on in 2016, January 1, you knew it, 4 level, and then January 1st, 2018, you knew it at 6 level, and you said, my God, it can't be any more than this. And then January 1st, 2020, it's like you're at 8, and you think this is the end, and then 2022, you've deepened, and it never ends. And so the spiritual path has become one of a complete surrender of not knowing anything, and a total contented with that, that there is nothing to understand. and it just is. It's the isness of it that's important, and not the doing of it, just the being in it.
Mm.
So I do want to say, you were talking about ashrams. There was an expression that I like to share that I heard in Rishikesh many years ago, and in India, and they say that the ashram will protect you from the world, but who will protect you from the ashram?
Mm.
And so what does this mean? I don't know. It could mean a lot of different things, but I think the thing is that you have to be in your own truth the whole time. That the ashram will give you a story, and it may be a wonderful story, and it be a growthful story, and it may never stop being a story, a part of your life. But the people who get disappointed when they leave, and they get disappointed in the teachings, and they get disappointed in, they thought it was going to be different. And now again, rather than ashram, it could be marriage, it could be job, it could be place to live, it could be landlord, girlfriend, boyfriend, it doesn't matter. You can substitute any, but they will not protect you from what you need to learn. And ultimately we need to take responsibility for ourselves, whatever that means.
Mm. Yes, and I think that it's so important as we live in a society that mostly tries to get everyone to be normal and the same and similar, is how to get back to our own essence and to our being. And like what you were saying before, that I think that it's so important, there's a big difference between the doing and the being, and we need more connection to our being, to what is, because I see this a lot of times. There is a lot of focus in society, at least what I've been surrounded by, that is like I'm doing. Even in the spiritual, more conscious like spheres, it's like, well, I'm doing this workshop, I'm doing this thing, I'm doing that, and it's like, have you just
I'm
taken the
doing
time to be?
so I'm a good person because I'm doing all of this.
Yeah, or I'm in the path because I'm doing this, and it's like, well, have you
Yeah.
taken the time to just be, to sit and do nothing in a sense, and to just be with yourself, with your environment, inner environment, outer environment, and to understand that place of fundamental openness, because that place is, as you were saying before, that not knowing, that curiosity, because in a sense everything is new all of the time. Even though I'm using my computer, I'm using my microphone, and it seems like I know them because I've been using them every day, well, each moment is new. So if I allow myself to be open to that, I can be.
It isn't my essence. It's just essence.
Mm.
So you said before my essence. It's not my essence.
Mm.
It's essence, and it's
Yes.
just, maybe I got a flavor, but it's not my essence, because
Mm.
that separates us.
Yes.
Because then it's your essence, and it's her essence,
Mm.
and so and it's all stages. It's all stages that you learn that it's really good for you for one to engage in their own strength of their identity, to become powerful within them, to empower themselves.
Mm.
But then that's not, you don't want to stay in that, because you want to realize that the empowerment isn't, and you're being known isn't really what you're really looking for. You may be looking, maybe the ego is looking for that,
Mm.
but ultimately on the spiritual path, it's not exactly what you want to do. And so as you get older, you drop those stories. When you get older with the path, you learn to drop those stories. And I just filled out an interview, a written thing to be on another podcast. And one of the questions was, what's important to you? And so, so I said family, I guess, but really nothing is really important.
Mm.
It's like, I'm past all of that. I mean, the Earth surviving. No, it's not really that important. I mean, I'm not against it, but I'm not going to. I remember being in Asia when North Korea and the U.S. were at it, and I thought, I'm not going to lose my peace over this. If they blow it up, they blow it up. But
Mm.
I'm not going to lose not my peace, but I'm not going to lose a sense of peace over it. If that's what happens, that's what happens. So what is really important to me is that nothing is important. And, maybe they'll get it, maybe they won't. I don't know.
Mm. And
Meaning they'll understand what I'm trying to say to them.
yeah, and I'm interested in that. If nothing is important, in a sense, everything is important. It might not be the same way that we tend to think about it and how we get attached to outcomes or different things.
Absolutely. I wrote recently that being not feeling comfortable anywhere means that I'm comfortable everywhere. So not being attached to one particular flavor means that I'm attached to all the flavors.
Mm.
And so the question in terms of what's important in terms of world peace or world health or green smoothies for everybody, those things aren't very important to me. And so in the neutrality of being, there is no weighing. So how
Mm.
can there be importance? Yes, everything. Yes, I could have written everything is important equally, perhaps equally as important.
Mhm.
Is everything is important. Maybe not equally, but everything is important.
Mm. Yes, I I
Yeah.
remember with that. I remember we were once with my teacher. We were practicing some Tibetan yoga um, movements and postures. And we were doing one, and he was like, "This is the most important posture." And then we would do something else, and he would say, "This is the most important posture." And then we would do, "This is the most important posture." And like someone asked him, "How come are they all?" Well, it's the one that you're doing, so it's the most important one. So,
Yes, of
and like
course.
I always remember that in terms of like just mind opening of that place. But I'm interested in because I know I was introduced through my mom and to astrology when I was a kid, and to Enneagram. It was one of the first things that I actually went to see someone and they used Enneagram, but a lot of people don't know much about them. So would you be able to share, how did you get into this, and then also what they are?
How did I get into Enneagram or
Yes.
Enneagram and astrology?
Yes, both.
Both of them.
Yeah.
By the way, were you doing Enneagram of Personality?
Yes.
Okay. Well, it's interesting because I mean it started in South America, so
Mhm.
so yeah, that's wonderful that you had that. What a wonderful tool. I started with astrology when I started with in this metaphysical bookstore. I bought astrology books, and I can't tell you what the pull was, other than it was mathematical. Perhaps, I just felt a rightness in it. I don't feel a rightness in everything that's done under astrology, but I feel a rightness in astrology, and I feel that it's an incredible tool when it's used right, meaning that there's a lot of things that are distractions that are taught in astrology, and maybe 10% of it is really clean and 90% of it is affected,
Mhm.
it's my point of view, and that may be an extreme point of view. The Enneagram, interestingly enough, when I left this community, I had someone suggest to me that an Enneagram workshop that was coming up, I would find that interesting. And in during this weekend class, um, on the Saturday, hearing about Enneagram, it reminded me of astrology. And so my life was set that day in the path of Enneagram and astrology together. And I happened to have met someone. I met someone that weekend who eventually told me that he knew of someone who had a system. And I went to work with this man for 2 weeks in Hawaii, where he was living at the time. And he taught me how astrology and the Enneagram of Personality work together. He taught me how to see how the Enneagram points are how they are expressed in astrological configurations. And it's not a simple one-to-one. It's not that complicated, but it is complicated enough that you do need to understand the energy of the astrology in order to understand how it can be changed and transmuted into Enneagram. And the Enneagram comes from Greek. It means nine. I mean, the word comes from Greek. It means nine-sided figure. And the teaching is that there are nine core personality stories. It's an incredible psychological tool to help us to know ourselves better and to have better relationships and more compassion for other people when we understand that they are running a pattern story. And you can recognize it. When you get good at it, you can recognize it in people when they say something, and sometimes you can recognize it before they say anything. And so, but the thing about it is that as a spiritual tool, it is unique because there is no bias, and it gives you the it helps you to get back into the moment. It tells you what your triggers are in order to be able to release the triggers and then live in the moment. And there is no spiritual tool that does this. There's no other spiritual tool that does this because these are color coded for your particular affliction, your particular programming. And if somebody says meditate or chant, that is good general knowledge, but there are personality types that the chanting isn't their thing, and there are personality types, there are people who meditation isn't their thing. And the Enneagram doesn't care. And that's what's so beautiful about it. It doesn't have any bias. It just uncovers to you what is yours, what you need to know.
Yes. And would you be able to share a little bit on, like, for someone that perhaps is interested in doing this, what could they learn about themselves and how can they use this for their personal growth?
Well, how they use it is you start learning to observe your own behavior, that you realize the patterning, that your mate that totally frustrates you, that your child that you can't understand, or your boss or your coworkers that really frustrate you. You realize that there's a patterning in their behavior, and you realize that they are susceptible to this patterning, and it's not really a conscious, it's totally unconscious. And so when you understand the particular behavior that you are, the particular stories that you're running, the behavior that is manifesting from the core of the basic fears, then it's like saying to either a roommate or intimate mate, when you call me 6 times a day, it upsets me, Oh, I didn't know that. Thank you. Thanks for telling me that. And so the Enneagram is continually tapping you on the shoulder and saying, that you're attached in this way, that your core fear is about this, or that your core is about fear or anger or emotion, and that your story is about this, and that you then go to this and you do this, and you're pretty quickly, well, my experience was just you pretty quickly get it. And but I mean, if you're young, the 20-year-olds I work with, it's not so easy for them. I had a client write me maybe 6 months or a year ago and say that, what you told me 3 years ago, I didn't think it was true at the time, but I think she was a 1, so she's a perfectionist. But now that I think about it, I think you were onto something. And would you send me that recording again, because I want to listen to it again? And I said, wonderful. 3 years is nothing,
Mm.
in her 20s, late 20s. 3 years is nothing. She's getting it. She's realizing that as a perfectionist, she lives from a sense of frustration and resentment because nobody in the world is doing it right. And the thing is that her sense of doing it right changes moment to moment. And so it's really hard when you live with a person like that to do it the right way, because it changes based on where they're feeling frustrated and they're feeling that they are not capable. It comes from incapability within themselves to accept their own ability, and so they get frustrated, and their way of attacking the world is to make sure that everybody does it the right way, and so they're called the perfectionist.
Yes, 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 yes. You know that it's interesting and something that you said, that the way that I interpret it, at least. So tell me if this is the way that you meant it. Um, when I've seen a lot of people that use astrology in a very rigid way, and like in a way that they can tell the future, or even like using Enneagram to tell people, okay, this is exactly how you are. No? And my understanding, and based on my learnings and what my mom has shared with me a lot of times, is that there is this spiral of consciousness and awareness that, yes, I might still have these certain configurations or these certain traits, yet it is different because it keeps on changing based on where I am as a consciousness. Is that what you meant by like this person is changing all of the time as like they're perfectionist, yet that changes how it looks?
Well, I don't think that's what I meant.
Okay.
But I mean, moment to moment, there is changes. The perfectionists, they always come from that story. While they can have in the Enneagram teaching, you take on personas, that you go to your wings and you go to your stress place and you go to relaxation place, which are different numbers. You don't
Mm.
become a one, can have a 9 wing, and then in stress they go to 7, in relaxation they go to no, in stress they go to 4, in relaxation they go to 7, and so they don't become a 7, but they bring on some of the 7 qualities and some of the 4 qualities, and some of the 9 qualities in their wing. And so, but they're still at the core of the one. The teaching, the way I learned it and the way I share it, is that we have the one number that is at our core. And now there
Mm.
are other, you may have learned it a little bit differently, and that's okay. That's the same thing with astrology. The astrology, which you talked about, is there is a rigidity. I don't actually do any predictions. I'm not actually interested. I can't tell you when you're going to have a relationship, but I can tell you what's blocking it from happening.
Mm.
And that to me is more important. The timing of it is not important at all. It's inconsequential. It'll happen when it's supposed to happen. So I don't believe in good or bad as far as astrology. There is no right or wrong. It's just what it is. To understand the placements of the placements of the planets in their strength and weakness positions in the chart, in which house they influence, which part of your life they influence, and whether they're strong in the sign they're in or weak in the sign that they're in. I can spend 90 minutes just talking about this and taking you deeper and deeper and deeper into your understanding of how you manifest, not who you are in the personality sense, not who you are in the essence. Who you are in the essence is to let go of all of this personality stuff, to let go of the idea of me, mine, you, me. Just you let go of all of it, to become what you become, to become essence.
Mm. Yes, and I love that. I mean, like for me, and I think that is one of the key things in terms of understanding the energies and understanding what's in the way, understanding what's blocking, because that is the way that I, like, for me at least, it's like, if someone tells me like, oh, next year you're going to like have like a relationship, or next, and it's like, like, how do I know that, like, where is that coming from? Whereas if there's a, like, there's this energy that is blocking the potential for a relationship, then it's like, oh, okay, now I have something that I can do. Now there's an understanding, and there is a place that I can focus and try to work with the energetic blockages that are in the way for me to get to that place that potentially I want to be.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm doing, is helping people using these ancient tools. While the Enneagram of Personality is not so old, the idea of nine-sidedness, I like to say that even in, because I've done a lot of traveling been in 56 countries. I've done a lot of traveling, and I was a trader for 12 years. So I went around the world buying handicrafts in India, Nepal, and Thailand, and Bali, and many other places, and to bring back to sell in the West. And so I used to get this idea from being in the marketplaces, because these guys were pretty sharp in the marketplaces. They may not have gone to college, they may not be sophisticated psychologically, but the thing is that they were pretty sharp. And I got the idea that in Mesopotamia, where they had millions of business receipts and were pretty sharp civilization, those merchants knew who would buy a ton, which is the 9, because they don't want to say no to anything, and the 4, they wanted to tell how beautiful they look in the apparel, because then they'd buy that, and that they know that the 6 would be doubtful, and that so that they'd have to convince them they'd have to resell them 4 times in the same visit. And the 1 wanted it to be perfect, and that the 9 and that the 7 wouldn't spend much time buying. They didn't give it a number, but they knew these. I felt that they knew, even in Mesopotamia, they knew in the marketplaces, they could read people, and they didn't sell everybody the same way. This is going back now over 5,000 years, my estimation. And so that's where the Enneagram started, as far as I'm concerned. And the astrology started there too, with the omenology, with the trying to predict the future, because the king gods were infallible, and so they didn't want to make wrong decisions, so they tried to figure out a way to blame it on somebody else, ministers, and then the ministers realized that you'd only get one wrong answer, and so they looked for a way outside themselves, to the way the birds flew, and the way with the sacrifices, the way the organs, which direction they were going, and the way the shadows and how the wind picked up, and all of this. They looked for reasons outside themselves, and that's what has traced the beginnings of astrology to. Who knows, what it actually was, but that's the beginning of the astrology that we read about, that it goes back to the king gods and the omenology, with the use of outside nature factors in order to determine outcomes.
Yes. And Indra, changing a little bit gears here, with what's going on now in the world, and I don't want to get too much into it, but how, or what would you share with people that are wanting to live a more connected and conscious life within these times?
Well, I think the thing is you have to learn to not get too bothered by the world. The fact is that if you're going to cry at the end of every sad movie or happy movie, that's okay at the end of a movie, because the movie ends. But if you do that in real world, you have a lot of ups and downs, and the spiritually, you want to end up with a more even plane. And so I had a teacher who used to say that she believed and disbelieved everything, that everything has a truth, and yet nothing is true at the same time. And so the idea is to be in the world, but not of it. And so the things that are happening in the world, it's, we don't know whether they're good or bad. They're probably both good and bad, and maybe good and bad. Like I say, with astrology, it may not to apply to anything, because I like to go back to say that so in 1949, Buddhism was not known in the world, but it is all over the world now. And do
Mm.
you know what event caused that?
No, can you share?
The Chinese invading Tibet. And so while we can say, oh my God, the Chinese invaded Tibet and the Dalai Lama had to escape by his mere whiskers, and what a horrible climb he had out of the country. But due to those circumstances, now Buddhism is all over the world. It's become a major player in religious understanding, in the religious world, and understanding, and it means that a tremendous amount to people. And what's the cause of that? Well, there is a kind of a direct cause, is that the Chinese they got the idea to go into Tibet, and it pushed Tibet Buddhism all over the world.
Mm.
Tibetan
Yes.
Buddhism.
Yes, yes, yes. It's interesting because I mean that is one of the main things that has been my path, the Tibetan Buddhist teachings. And as you say, like if that wouldn't have happened, then I wouldn't have been introduced to it, and a lot of people haven't been introduced to it. And it's interesting that, as you're saying, a lot of times perspective as well is what allows us to see something not as rigid as we might think that it is, in terms of the valuing it in terms of good or bad, or labeling it as positive or negative. And having that perspective is what makes a difference.
Well, I think letting go in good or bad perspective is really an important boon to the spiritual path, because then all situations are neutral. Everything is neutral. Even in astrology, it's all neutral. It's neither good nor bad. It just is. And in the Enneagram, they're all junky stories. When you're stuck in whichever number is your story, it's a horrible place to be when you're stuck in it. And any of them on the high side are much more comfortable places to be. And so the spiritual path becomes a deepening. That's where the spiral comes into account, is that you keep spiraling around and around, but at a different level, and hopefully you spiral up, and so you're at a different level when you come back to the same teaching. When you're now, my kids are talking with my grandchildren. It's a lot of training in time off their computers. That's a thing. And so my grandchildren are 7 and 9, and so they're learning to not be on their internet tools all the time. But now you go to your age, and you're probably trying to stay off of social media. Your teacher is saying, don't go into, limit your social media time, a certain amount each day or each week. And then you get to my age, and you maybe have another understanding of it, is that you get to a place where that you can do it, but you're not attached to it. We had somebody say something yesterday in one of my circles is that let's not sit in all the bummers. And the thing is that my wife and I said to each other is that we weren't sitting in the bummers, but we were exploring the bummers, and we were celebrating them when we were exploring them. And he said, let's celebrate life rather than be always trying to release and let go all of the bummers. And so I say, we didn't mind being in them because we weren't identifying with them.
Mhm.
We were only releasing them. And most of the group, which is more like your age, they may not get that yet,
Mhm.
and that's okay.
Yes.
Is that
Mm.
clear?
Yes,
So,
definitely.
so at different stages, at the 7 and 9 year old, and at the 30s-year-old, and 40s-year-old, and at the 75-year-old, we sound in India, we sat around at the end of a satsang and say, I don't know anything, even what I knew yet, I know even less than I did yesterday, and we're so happy about it. And the young people may look at us a little weird, and that's okay. But to us, that releasing, that letting go, that continual surrender is the joy. We don't have to know what it is we're surrendering. It's just the continual surrender. That's the pray without ceasing of the
Mm.
Bible.
Yes, yes, and definitely, like at every stage of our lives, like there's differences, there's different needs, there's different wants, there's different understandings based on our experience. There's different type of growth, and of course, it's not everyone the same ages has the same awareness or the same understanding. Yet there are certain things that have more commonality within age ranges. So as we're coming, Indra, towards the end of this conversation, I was wondering now, as you're saying this, with your experience in all of this for more than 50 years, what are some of the key things that you would like to share with like people that are younger, like around the 20s, their 30s?
Well, yeah, love yourself is pretty important. I notice that there's a stage of inactivity, and then when people get empowered, they really start shouting about that. You see that in social media, that I'm empowered now. And what I'd like to share on the podcast, that that's also a stage, and that there's another stage after that. It isn't really about the empowering, it's about the ability to be able to freedom isn't being able to do what you want. Freedom is not having to do that.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that there is a stage, the stage of empowering is very important, but it's a pretty much egotistical stage. Otherwise, we wouldn't get so much joy over it. And so ultimately then we get to a place where we release all of that, and whether we do it or we don't, we feel good either way. And that the goals become very simple, that our enjoyment, I've reached a place where I kind of eat the same thing, the same meals every day. And it's like, uh, it wasn't the way I used to be. As a seven, we like new experiences, but at this particular moment, I kind of eat the same meals every day. And the reason that it's so much fun is because it's like I've never eaten it before. And that's kind of the way I approach everything, is that is the enjoyment of the moment, rather than any sort of achievement or expectations. So those have been mostly let go. That doesn't mean that there is no drive. That doesn't mean that there is no attainment, or it doesn't mean that there isn't uh, things I'd like to do, but it doesn't mean that I'm attached to the result of them. but I'm in a more neutral space that whether they happen or not, it's the being in them rather than the achievement of them. So that's a few thoughts that to leave people with.
Beautiful, beautiful. So for everybody listening, if there's anything that has resonated with you in terms of our conversation, if you're interested in understanding or deepening a little bit more on your own personal journey through astrology and Enneagram, you might be interested in reaching out to Indra and working with him. So Indra, where can they find you if they're interested in working with you?
So I have a website, indrarinzler.com, all one word, and my email, if you feel to write, indrarinzler@gmail.com. I'm pretty accessible and I answer your questions. And if anybody's interested, I like to give a free offer. I will send you your Vedic astrology charts if you're interested in that, and a little bit of how to read it. I need a date, time, and place of birth. So send that to me at indrarinzler@gmail.com. And I also offer to people, also for free, an Enneagram test. So it's a simple paragraph reading test. You just figure out which one you relate to the most. It's like 5 to 10 minutes. And for most people, it will give you it might give you your number, and if not, it'll give you a few to choose from that you can start reading about. And so just write me and ask for either of those or both of them, and I'd be happy to help people. And any questions you have at all or want to reach out, I'm happy to respond.
Beautiful, beautiful. And we will put those links on the show notes so that it's accessible for everyone. Thank you, Indra, for a wonderful conversation. Thank you for sharing with us and for your time. And for everybody listening, thank you for being here. And we will see you all in the next episode. Bye.
What did you like the most about this episode? Take a moment to think about what change you can make in your life today.
Share your conscious action on social media using #ConsciousAction and tagging @ConsciousActionNZ so we can celebrate your impact on the world and create a ripple effect.
One easy action we would love for you to take right now is to share, like, and subscribe to this podcast. This will help us get these messages out into the world and inspire more people to take conscious action in their own lives, contributing to the better world we hope for.